Okay, so we're diving into something pretty wild today. We're talking Caligula.
A name that still has the power to shock centuries later.
Right. And not just the historical figure, but this film from, what was it, the 70s? Getting a total revamp here in the 21st century. Like enough lost footage to make a whole new movie, our ultimate cut deep dive. What do we even make of that?
Well, it's more than just some deleted scenes tacked on. This was practically rebuilt from scratch. Imagine hours of footage never seen before, re-edited, new music, the works.
So like finding a lost chapter that changes how we see the whole story?
Exactly. And that's what makes this so fascinating because with Caligula, so much of what we think we know is clouded in myth and propaganda.
Which, speaking of myth and propaganda, IMDb goes pretty hard right out of the gate, right? They describe the film as following Caligula's descent into, and I quote, depravity, devastation, and madness.
Setting the stage for, shall we say, a memorable viewing experience.
To say the least. Though, that kind of gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? This descent into madness, whether it's historically accurate or not, it's captivated audiences for, well, centuries.
Absolutely. And this film, especially the ultimate cut, forces us to confront that, the man behind the myth. Monster or a victim of circumstance, or maybe a bit of both.
Which makes me think of those user reviews you dug up. One called The Ultimate Cut a Revelation, especially with the added footage.
Understandably. For years, rumors circulated about what they left out. The original production was a total mess. Clashes between the director, Tinto Brass, and the financier, Bob Buchan.
Wasn't he a magazine publisher?
Yeah, and let's just say he had a vision for this film.
We even found that documentary where Guccione and Gore Vidal, the screenwriter, pretty big deal himself, tried to explain what happened.
Talk about behind-the-scenes drama.
For sure. But it makes you wonder how much that impacted the final product, right?
Adds a whole other layer to this ultimate cut, doesn't it?
Absolutely. But, not all the reviews were totally gushing. One called it flawed, but fun, which, I gotta admit, made me laugh. They loved the visuals, the sets, the costumes, even found some humor in it.
It's interesting, isn't it? Even amidst the, shall we say, intense subject matter, the craftsmanship shines through.
Right. Like they weren't messing around with the production value.
Exactly. But it does make you wonder, is this ultimate cut true to Tinto Brass's original vision? Or is it something else entirely?
Especially with all the drama we know went down behind the scenes. Some people even seem to prefer the original cut.
It's like we're talking about two different films, almost, both born from the same footage, but...
Two different versions of history.
And that's where this whole idea of a director's cut gets really interesting.
Right. What is the director's vision when you've got all this other stuff going on?
Right. Studio interference, creative differences. And now, decades later, this ultimate cut emerges. It's a whole conversation about artistic intent.
And what actually ends up on screen. It's like we're trying to put together this historical puzzle, but someone dumped a whole other box on the table.
With extra pieces that might change the whole picture. And speaking of pieces, one review I came across, they were talking about Malcolm McDowell's performance as Caligula. Said it was good, but they felt John Hurt had him beat in I, Claudius.
Interesting. I actually thought that comparison to I, Claudius was fascinating.
Yeah.
You've got these two powerhouse actors tackling the same infamous role.
It's like this dialogue across the decades, right? How we interpret history through performance.
Exactly. And it just shows how, even within a particular period, there are so many ways to portray a figure like Caligula.
Right. McDowell, he brings this raw intensity to the role.
While Hurt may be a quieter kind of menace.
Yeah, exactly. Different approaches, but both captivating in their own way.
This same review, they also mentioned the sets and the costumes.
Yeah.
Even called out the toga game as strong.
Had to throw that in there, huh?
Hey, gotta appreciate the details. But seriously, you can tell they spared no expense. Even back in the 70s, they went all out.
It's true. Even the more critical reviews, they acknowledge the craftsmanship, the visuals, the scope of it all. It's kind of this weird contrast.
With the subject matter being, well, what it is.
Yeah. You've got this controversial, intense story, but it's presented with this undeniable artistry.
Speaking of intense,
Mm-hmm.
we do have to address the elephant in the room. Or maybe the orgy in the room.
Right, getting to that.
One reviewer said the nudity was so constant, it almost lost all meaning.
And that ties into a larger debate about this period, about Caligula himself. Was he really this embodiment of depravity that history often paints him as? Or is that a narrative spun by his enemies?
Because let's be real, there were plenty of those.
Exactly. It's still debated among historians today. Was he truly mad? Or was that just the most convenient story for those who wanted him gone?
So we're not just talking about a film's excess here,
Mm.
but potentially how it colors our perception of the past.
And that's what makes this ultimate cut so interesting. Does it lean into that spectacle? Or does it try to offer something more nuanced? It's tough to say.
Makes you think about the choices they made, right? With all this extra footage, what did they decide to include? What did they leave out?
Because even with this ultimate cut, we're still getting a curated version of events, a
Yeah.
particular perspective.
Someone decided what we see and what we don't. Which, speaking of seeing and not seeing, there was one user review that really stuck with me. They called this ultimate cut a satisfying conclusion to their, years-long fascination with the film's production.
Wow, a true fan on a quest.
Right. And they said even with whatever flaws it might have, you can tell there was so much dedication poured into it.
And that's got to count for something, doesn't it? The years of work that must have gone into restoring this footage, putting it all together, making those tough decisions about what to keep, what to cut.
It's like cinematic archaeology almost.
Totally. Digging through the past, trying to piece together a complete picture.
And who knows what else is still buried out there.
Right. Even after all this, there's that lingering question, what didn't make the cut?
It's like they're giving us this beautifully restored puzzle box.
But we only get to see some of the pieces inside.
Right. And maybe that's part of the point,
Yeah.
you know? We're left wondering what else is in there, what might have been.
And how do those choices, those missing pieces, shape how we see the whole picture?
It's a lot to think about.
It really is. And it brings us back to why we're even having this conversation. You've got this historical figure shrouded in controversy.
A film production infamous for its own share of drama.
And now this ultimate cut, decades later, sparking all these debates about art, history, interpretation. It's a lot to unpack.
It really is. So where do we even go from here? What's the takeaway from all of this?
I think it leaves us with a question that's bigger than just this film or even Caligula himself. Can something be flawed, even problematic maybe, and still have value?
That's a tough one.
It is. But can it still spark important conversations? Make us challenge our assumptions? Maybe even teach us something about ourselves along the way? I think so.
I see what you mean. It's not about condoning or condemning.
It's about understanding.
And sometimes that means being okay with being a little uncomfortable, challenging what we think we know.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe that discomfort leads us to a deeper, more meaningful understanding of the world. It's all connected.
Well said. So, to anyone listening, if you're up for a cinematic journey full of historical intrigue, some seriously stunning visuals, and, yeah, maybe a little discomfort,
I'd say check out The Ultimate Cut.
you might be surprised by what you find and what you learn about yourself along the way.
Absolutely. Even if you don't agree with everything you see, it's an experience that will get you thinking.
Food for thought. That's what we like. Thanks for diving deep with us today, everybody. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those brain cells buzzing.